Those are the same thing. And so then you might say, well, how do you get out of that? And you can't get out of that by not thinking about yourself. That's just going to backfire, right? So if you're anxious and you go to a party and you think, I'm not going to think about myself, and that's all you're thinking about, like you're dead. I used to treat my socially anxious clients, say, go to a party and do everything you can to make other people feel comfortable. So I would explain to them what I just explained to you, but I would say, that doesn't mean you can stop thinking about yourself. It means you can start only thinking about what you can provide to other people. And that was invariably an improvement on the strategy that they had been using. But this is so crucially important, because we are so reciprocal as human beings that you are lost if you only serve your own whims. It doesn't work in the long run. It alienates people. It produces a life that's devoid of meaning. It makes you anxious and isolated. And it makes you self-conscious and miserable. And so it is the case, as we alluded to earlier, that perversely enough, the best possible thing that you can do for yourself, all things considered, over the longest possible run, is to work as hard as you can on behalf of what's best in other people.
Yeah, and you and I talked about this the last time. I forget when it was, a couple of years ago, I think, but I was talking, or you asked me what makes a good SEAL, like what makes a good SEAL, and I said, well, doesn't matter. Look, you got to be a good shot, of course. You got to be in good physical condition. All those things are important. You got to have the skill set. But far and away, what makes a good SEAL is someone that puts the team before themselves. That's it. That's the thing. And if you're the best shot, you're the fastest, you're the strongest, but you have yourself above the team, I don't want you in my platoon. And no one wants you in the platoon. That's the way it works. So it's interesting that psychologically, if you're focused on yourself, it's going to cause problems. Either the problem of egocentric arrogance or the problem of like paranoia, or what you just used to describe it? I mean, when someone's just focused on
self-consciousness.
Self-consciousness. That's the thing that when I see people that are self-conscious, I was like, hey, you know who notices that you have a zit on your cheek right now? You. No one else cares. No one else cares. No one's. It doesn't matter. When you walk into a room and you feel like you don't have the experience to be in a leadership position, the person that's thinking that is you. It doesn't really matter. Now, if you go in and try and overcompensate for that by saying, listen, I just graduated from college and I really know how to execute this stuff, you're going to get crushed. Because you're trying to make up for the fact that you actually don't know what you're doing. And everyone knows you don't. You just got here. So we know you don't know what you're doing, but we don't really care about it, so we don't see it as
No, we just
negative.
care if you think you know what you're doing more than you actually know.
Then it's a problem.
Yeah, then that's definitely a problem.
And that whole thing about the authoritarian mindset. And I did this series of podcasts about this book called The Psychology of Military Incompetence. And they have these authoritarian people, and when they look at the military, they think, they're like,
you get that in the police too.
Yep, you get it in the police, you get it in law enforcement. You get these people that have that authoritarian mindset. They see what it looks like from the outside and they think, oh, this is going to be awesome. This is where I belong. And so they go and everyone's going to wear a uniform. They're going to have to call me sir. They're going to have to obey what I say. It's like a dream for them. And in non-combat situations, those people can perform pretty well because we're on the parade field. I need everyone in the same uniform. I'm going to inspect your barracks rooms. I'm going to make sure that you follow my orders as soon as they're given. That's like a beautiful place for that authoritarian mindset, is a non-combat situation. But you put those people in combat, and now all of a sudden there's literally no rules anymore. There's a very small number of rules. And now you have to deal with, Jordan, who listened to me when we were on the parade field, but now he's scared to death that he's going to die and he's not listening to me anymore. Now what do I do? How do I handle
and he has
that?
reason to be scared.
He has reason to be scared. So you would see, and I got to see this a lot inside the military, the people that had the authoritarian mindset, the closed mindset, they had real problems when you put them into combat situations where there's mayhem and chaos and they can no longer control it. And they freak out because of that. It's a real problem.
Well, like you said, I don't think there's a better definition of chaos than warfare. Like, obviously, that's a place where the rules are suspended. So then the question would be, well, what's the best possible mindset to bring to bear on a situation where the rules have been suspended, right? You can certainly see the distribution of responsibility and an appeal to voluntarism is going to be of great utility under those, not least so you don't get shot in the back by your own men.
Yeah, yeah. And then the creativity aspect, right? Because all of a sudden there's no rules, or there's very limited amount of rules.
Yeah.
And if we've got to find out a different way to execute these missions that's going to make more sense in this particular environment that we're in, that no book and no training has prepared us for. I got asked a little while ago about, well, if we were going to war with China,
Mm-hmm.
and I was leading, my troops into combat, what would I be thinking about?
Mm-hmm.
And I said the thing I would be focused on, the same thing I'm always focused on, especially going into a combat situation, and that is keeping an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't know what's going to happen. The enemy doesn't know what's going to happen. I don't know exactly how my troops are going to react. I don't even know how I'm going to react.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get a fixed mindset where I'm saying, this is what we're going to do and this is how it's going to be, as soon as that combat starts, that you can throw that thing out the window.
Yeah.
And now if I have a closed mind, I fall apart. If I have an open mind, I look around and say, okay, I see some adaptations we can make right now. Here's what we need to do. Here's some adjustments we can make. And that's when I ran training, that was the purpose of my training, was to open people's minds. Was to put them in situations where if they stuck with a fixed mindset and they didn't open their mind and they didn't see other perspectives, they were going to fall apart. They're going to get
So
destroyed.
that other perspective, so that's got to be allied with that willingness to incorporate information from the bottom up, because you're going to get, so that's where the diversity claims of the radical left have some utility, is like, well, in any open-ended situation, you want a genuine diversity of viewpoints because the situation is shifting, and the more options you have in front of you, up to some limited degree, because, time to process all those options also matters. You don't want a uniformity of opinion, because you're going to run into this problem that you just described.
Here's a good example. The Iraqi military, right? It's basically a caste system. You had the officers at top, and then you had a bunch of, almost slave labor a little bit.
Yeah.
And the officers would skim money off the paychecks of the soldiers.
Right.
That's how they operated.
Right.
And
there's a loyalty building exercise for you.
Not the best loyalty building exercise at all. And so
the rule is don't rip off armed subordinates? How's that for a rule?
Here's the thing that's interesting. So our chain of command found out that this was happening, and there was a lot of pressure throughout the US military, like, we've got to stop this. These soldiers are getting ripped off. This is terrible. We need to prosecute the officers that are skimming money from the paychecks. So I went and brought my interpreter, and we go talk to these soldiers.
Yeah.
And you say, hey, is it true that your boss is skimming money off your paycheck? Ready to write it down and and they go, well, of course, he's the boss. Of course he's going to take some of the money. I mean, that's sort of what that's totally normal. They weren't angry about it. They were just like, oh yeah, well, he's the boss. He's going to take some money. And then when I get promoted, I'll be able to take money. That's the way their system functions. And it was...
See, I jumped to the wrong conclusion.
That investment, that was my conclusion too, because I was a young enlisted guy. And if my officer would have been skimming my money, I would have been totally against it. But that was a very normal thing. And so I kind of try to back off and say, this is the way their culture is. That's the way their culture is. It's different than ours. It's unacceptable.
Were there parameters of skimming?
Yeah, there are. There's parameters of skimming.
Right. So you could take some percent.
Yes. And it's the same thing with the Iraqis. We'd say, hey, we're going on an operation tonight. We've got an operation tonight. Can you bring 30 guys tonight to conduct this operation? And they would tell you 100% of the time, yeah. Yep. And they'd show up with 9, or they'd show up with 6, or they'd show up with 48. And because it's inshallah, right? It's God willing, we'll have 30 people. If that's the way it's supposed to be, that's the way it'll be. And instead of us going, hey, this isn't the way we do it, we had to say, okay, well, how do they operate? What do they think like? How can we incorporate their perspective on things into our culture? And how can we merge these cultures together so that we can communicate with them in an effective way? So we go, oh, okay, cool. How many people do you think you can bring tonight? And they're going to give you a better answer than if you say, can you bring this many? It's a little nuance in the way that you interact with them.
Right.
But if you
that might have even been a politeness norm, because their response to you might have been, Well, the polite thing is to
Yes.
tell the person who's asking what they want to hear.
Yep.
Right. And that is different than saying, well, how many people do you think you could bring?
Totally different.
Yeah.
So if I had a fixed mindset and a closed mind, it would have been saying, this is the military. A platoon is 40 guys. You need to bring a platoon tonight. If you don't bring a platoon, the world explodes, right? Nothing's going to work. But the open-minded attitude is like, oh, they think a little bit different than we do. Hey, how many people can you bring? And all of a sudden, okay, you can bring 12.